And I'd say my largest disappointment with the schooling system is that it's so focused on abstract topics that don't really always apply to life or apply to connecting you to the natural world. So I know that you worked in teaching with First Nations children. First Nations people are the cultures that are still closest to the earth. Historically, not so long ago, they're living on the land and natural food ways and connected to the ecology around them. What did you learn from them? What did you observe differences in them and their connection to nature as opposed to, say, Western children? And yeah, interested.
Yeah, I did spend about 5 years working on First Nations communities, and I just found it really fascinating because, well, one of the things I think that I came away with is that in First Nations culture or Indigenous culture, they really just look at nature as another family member, and that everything has a spirit or a being. So, not just the living things, that we consider living, like animals and plants, but also the rocks and the wind, and everything has that spirit and that being that they respect. And so I think that's an important realization too, is just that they've often said, I've heard from several different people, the rocks are our grandfathers. And I think that's something, through your education background with geology, you can really understand why, that they've been around for so long, and it makes sense that there are our grandfathers, so things like that really make sense, I think, when you look at it from that perspective, both from a Western
Yeah.
perspective and an Indigenous perspective.
Yeah.
But just treating everything around you like a family member, I think, is important, because then you will protect it, and you will, quit your job to go and protect something that you love. Maybe not necessarily quit, but you'll take the time, and make the effort. And I don't know how many, of us in like the more Western culture can say that, you would stop what you were doing and put, protecting nature first. I don't think that's something that many of us can say we would do, that it's a priority in our life. But I think for Indigenous cultures around the world, it's so ingrained in them, and they are so connected to the land in different ways, that for them it's a priority to protect it. And I think that we can learn a lot from that. And, with working with Indigenous children, they might not necessarily know the names of everything around them, but
Yep.
they understand it in a different way than we do. And they know, how to use it, and they know how it's useful in their lives.
Mm.
And I think in some ways that's almost more important, because they see the purpose in what's around them and how it connects to their lives, and their culture, especially, because with a lot of their culture, their drumming and their traditional dress, things like that, it uses elements of nature, and you can't, perform in the powwow if you don't have, the right materials to use, for example, or the right drum to drum with. And a lot of those things come from nature. But also just, I think more and more Indigenous culture is becoming something a little bit more in the mainstream, because I think that many people are realizing that there's so much value and wisdom there that we can learn from, just
Yeah.
even in terms of working with nature, instead of against it, to, come towards a common goal or something that we want to achieve, I guess. I just think there's so much value there, and um, I've always wanted to kind of promote that Indigenous perspective as much as I can. So I'm still working towards that in my position right now, and trying to work with Indigenous members of Indigenous communities so that their teachings can be a part of our week, a regular part of our week, and so that students again can connect locally. Because that's the other thing about Indigenous culture, is that, you know, it is based on local plants and animals. And so, you know, for the past year now, I've been going out regularly, trying to go out almost every weekend and listening to these teachings through just Blackfoot phenology about how the lunar cycles are connected to different movements of plants and animals and the cycles of nature. And so instead of kind of looking at the Gregorian calendar or Western calendar, trying to look at our seasons through those lunar cycles and those different that phenology perspective. So I've learned a lot through doing that, because it's just a different way to look at the land too, and to see it changing. And, you know, right now looking at, okay, when is the choke cherries ready to harvest, and when can I go and pick Saskatoons, and, you know, is it the same as last year, or has it shifted a little bit? And so I think by doing those things and paying attention to those changes, it can help students and, you know, everybody just pay attention to the land around them and notice those changes. And then when things happen to that land, you notice and you care, and you want to do something about it.
Awesome. That really is, yeah, you've captured the essence of the differences between Western education models and then the First Nations understanding, and it's even closer to sort of Eastern philosophies understanding that all of life is connected. There's and because of that interconnectivity, they are like family members, the rocks and the trees and the air and the wind and the waters and the animals and the plants really are and should be treated like our family because of, you know, the interconnectedness of life. I think that Newtonian physics and reductive types of sciences and atheist types of ideologies have really separated us from that connectedness to nature, seeing things as just labeled bits and pieces, and but it doesn't really serve our life to think too far in that direction. It actually does disconnect us.